खोलो मैं सेटिंग मोबाइल हॉटस्पॉट ही क्या दिखा रहा है कैन नॉट यूज मोबाइल डाटा सर्वर इज ऑन चालू हो रहा है संडे बंद हो गया सही करते हैं नहीं वो हार्ड वर्क नहीं काम कर रहा है मैं दिखाया था उसको नहीं तो काम नहीं दिखाओ जाके फ़ोन में नहीं दिक्कत है फ़ोन में दिक्कत है भाई फ़ोन में दिखाओ तो कोई नहीं तो कर सब ठीक है हमारा तो गिराने की है आप
First time I'm also very.
Please keep the movement and
They are all our colleagues.
water washroom. They want to go now and keep them getting the dogs. Don't move too much. Okay. All the students are expected to follow this protocol. Am I clear? Thank you.
रवि क्या हो जाए पीछे पीछे
At the bottom.
So can you all settle down, please? Okay, we'll start in next 3-4 minutes. Some of our panelists are on the way and they will be joining maybe 5-7 minutes. So maybe after 2 to 3 minutes somebody is joining. So once you settle down in next 2-3 minutes, we will start the session.
हाँ भाई हाँ भाई हम्म 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 ठीक ठीक
So what we do before we formally start the session, I think Professor John is here. Let him talk whatever he wants and wants so that they remain occupied. We will start the session maybe 5 minutes. You can talk. Yeah, great. Yeah.
This may be better than. So, I'm just worried about which would be the best place to talk from. There's a button here. Is this working? This is better, right? Probably better. And it's more uniform. Okay, well, my name is John Allen, and I'm a professor from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And I guarantee you don't know where Urbana-Champaign is. It's south of Chicago by 2.5 hours. And the most notable thing, other than the fact that I come from there, of course, is that there's no traffic there. I mean, I do see cars when I drive to work. And I'm on a good highway. And I live on 3 acres with a stream and woods. There's all this land, and I live on top of the Mahomet Aquifer, which is the size of the Mississippi River, and I have a well plugged into the Mahomet Aquifer, and that's where I get my water. So I actually learned a lot about water in trying to understand the system when I bought the house. Okay, so that's enough about me, but I'm an electrical engineer, and I guess it's not enough about me. Sorry. So I got my PhD at the I got my undergraduate degree at the University of Illinois, and then I went to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, got master's PhD, and then straight to Bell Labs. And I was at Bell Laboratories, AT&T Bell Laboratories, for 32 years. That's a long time. And then I retired, and then I went to the University of Illinois, and I've been there since 2003. And the only thing I regret is I didn't go earlier, because there's a lot of really talented students, and having, gobs and gobs of, that's many students, is a much better experience than working all by yourself or working with 1 or 2 colleagues. At Bell Labs, my career at Bell Labs was very valuable. It's interesting that one of my colleagues at Bell Labs was an Indian fellow by the name of Mohan Sandhi. I doubt that anybody here knows him, but he basically was my teacher for mathematics and acoustics and science, and we used to stand at his door going in, and we'd spend an hour, 2 hours at the blackboard with him practically every day, and he was just a lovely, lovely person. Trained here in India, I think. And I knew it one time, but I don't know. Okay. So anyway, I've got this background that's been pretty broad, because acoustics is a good place to start from. And so it was a very good training session. My friend Mohan was very helpful in teaching me mathematics. So, one of the things, or the main thing that I'm supposed to talk about here, is about writing, about how to write a paper, and how to publish, and the importance of doing that. So I don't know, something just funny happened with the sound. Is it okay? So when I was in high school, I barely could write my name.
Yeah, please.
And my mother was really worried that something was wrong. And the thing that was wrong was that I just wasn't interested in writing. I had nothing to say. But then I got to college and I had to write my master's thesis and a PhD thesis I at least wrote something, okay, and it made sense. And I got to Bell Labs, and I decided I better learn how to write. So I spent a lot of time doing it, and initially, I have to admit that I hated it. Because I just wanted to go into the lab and play with some electronics or, make some piece of equipment. I won't go into details about that, but I had a lot of projects to work on. And the more I wrote, the more I found I spent more and more time writing and less time in the lab. And at one point, I can't believe this, but at one point, I said, I don't ever have to go into the lab again. I got enough stuff to write here. I can spend the rest of my life writing. And so that's all I do. I just sit in front of a computer and I write. Now, that sounds kind of introverted and kind of strange, but I love to write. And I've just finished writing a book of 300 pages and another 100 pages of problem sets and stuff like this. So, what's the secret to writing is to do it. Force yourself to do it. You could have the world's best idea, absolutely phenomenal idea, and if you can't document it, it isn't worth anything. You can't go up to somebody and say, hey, I got this great idea. It's the world's best mousetrap. You gotta see this. This is amazing. Won't go anywhere. You have to write it down. Even if you write it down and you publish it, that doesn't mean that anybody's going to bother to read it. So, I don't think it's the secret of writing, but the goal of writing is to learn how to express yourself in such a clear manner that when you write something, people have to read it. So, just publishing a paper, everybody does that. Obviously not everybody, or I wouldn't be standing here talking about it. But what's important is that when you think about writing a paper, you've got to formulate it in such a way that people can really understand what it is you're trying to say. And it's got to be as short as possible. Length isn't the goal. The goal is to express the idea in such a very clear manner that it's transparent. Somebody sits down, starts to read it, and they can't put it down because it's so interesting. Now, that's not easy to do. And it comes with clarity of thought. Right now I feel like I have clarity of thought. Maybe it's not being transmitted to you very well, but there's an idea. How do you write? Well, you write by having a very clear explanation of what it is you're trying to say. You've got to have these ideas in place. I think of linear thinking. Linear thinking means one idea falls out, and then another one falls in place, and it's just a sequence of things that are so obvious that the person can anticipate what the next step is. They can be reading your material, reading your thing, and they hit a sentence that they don't understand, and they'll put it down and they'll never pick it up again. It's just because that one sentence was misformulated. They got through the first page, said, okay, I see where this is going, sounds interesting. And then, bang, they hit some crazy sentence that belongs, 3 paragraphs later, and they go, what is this? I don't get it. You're done. You're toast. It's over. Your opportunity is lost. Okay, so that's kind of stop me at any time. Okay. So that's the big picture. The little picture, the details are, how do you write? Well, you have to learn the mechanics of it. So I personally, some people prefer to write on pencil and paper, write it out on pencil and paper, and then some people who are good at typing would prefer to write it on the computer right there. And the problem with writing it on the computer is that you can get all tangled up. You start correcting a sentence or a paragraph, and so in some ways, working on paper is very, very important. One last thing, another very important thing is to develop a talk, a PowerPoint. And then you give the PowerPoint, and you give it a dozen times, and each time you refine it, and that gives you all your figures. And you practice telling a story about your PowerPoint and your figures, and by the time you've given it 10 times and you have fixed all the figures, then the writing part is rather easy. And I'm open for questions.
So, Professor John, thank you so much for your opening remarks. We are still waiting for some of the panelists to come and join. Maybe Professor Balasingham has joined us. Can you have a few, maybe 5 minutes, an opening remark? Great. By the time we are expecting everybody to join us in this panel. Also, our Vice Chancellor sir will be joining us soon.
So, good afternoon. Nice to see so many people here. My name is Aktu Balasingham. I look like you guys, so you would think like I'm an Indian. Unfortunately, I was born in a country very closer to you, a little bit further south, from Sri Lanka. And I've been living in Norway for the last 34 years. So I went there just because of the civil war in Sri Lanka. Then I did my graduate school there. Then I did my undergraduate school, and then I went to UC Santa Barbara, so University of Santa Barbara, where my teacher was Professor Sanjit Mitra. He's an Indian guy coming from Calcutta. And that's the first time, actually, I was forced to write a thesis. And I came to know how to sort of put all my thoughts, all my words in an orderly fashion. And I was struggling. And I remember Professor Mitra told me that you should read Shrunk and White. This is a tiny little book, I think maybe around 20 pages or 25 pages, like a small pocket book. It tells you how to write scientific papers. So if you're trying to find it, I think it's still online. You can download this book, it's an e-book, for free of charge. You can read it by yourself. All the mistakes we normally make when we write. And the person who wrote this book clearly explained how you can put your thoughts together, how you can avoid simple mistakes that we make, and how to write the scientific papers. So writing novels, writing letters to your parents is different than writing scientific paper. So in writing scientific papers, normally you would like to convey a message or a result that you have been working for many years or many months, maybe in collaboration with other colleagues or other professors. So when you want to make this message or your conclusions very clear in a way that people can understand, people love to read it, and hopefully they will cite your work. That's how the science is right now. So my background is like the previous professor in electrical engineering. I work in signal processing and wireless communication, but I have moved a little bit from the traditional way of doing signal processing and wireless communication. So when I was coming to Lucknow, the person who came, Ankrit, he was a graduate student here, MTech. He was talking to me and asking me about what is my research and how to, find good problems. How to find good scientific problems, how to work on it, It is not easy nowadays because if you're working on a problem that N people have worked previously, it's going to be tough for you to publish those work. You need to find problems, they are interesting, hopefully they are new, or looking at the same problem from a different point of view. Then only you will be able to make a difference. Otherwise, you will be another N+1, and most likely your work will not be recognized. So what I am doing is that classical signal processing, wireless communications, or mobile communications, we don't work that anymore, unfortunately, in Norway. So we are working on new problems. Today, my lab consists of people from biology, and we like to learn from nature. How nature works, how can we understand nature, and how can we engineer them in a way that we can use them to solve new problems or problems that are unsolved. My focus is in medicine. I work at a hospital as well, so I work in a university as well as I'm working in Oslo University Hospital, where I have the opportunity to work with physicians. So the whole setup is actually an interdisciplinary work with physicians, biologists, all kinds of biologists, electrical engineers, computer scientists, and mathematicians. This is how the research is organized nowadays in big schools. And if you want to try to tackle real hard problems, then you will have to maybe approach them in a different way than you have been doing that for the last 50 years. So with that, I will ask you if you have any questions. By the way, I just want to thank Professor Datta for inviting me here. I met him 5 years ago in Noida when he was at Amity University. He invited for a similar conference like this. And it's a great pleasure for me to come back again to India. And thank you very much, and I wish you a very successful conference.
Thank you. I would like to thank Professor John Allen and Professor Lango Balasingham for their opening remarks. Most of the panelists are over here. Let me tell you about the discussion right now. The modality is completely informal. You can raise your hand and ask a question in between. And now it's my responsibility to introduce the panelists. Okay, we have Professor Vieira. He's from Technical University Bratislava in Slovak Republic. We have Professor Socrates from Vanderbilt University. He's also a distinguished scientist from Oak Ridge Laboratory. I'll just take a moment to explain Professor Socrates. He's a very, very senior person. His publications and all have attracted so much citations. And I think Chinese Academy have also given him a distinguished professor. So, Professor, thank you. We are very honored to have you here. Also, one important point: if you look at him, you can see a character in our one of our most famous Indian movie. Can you recollect? I tell you, Professor, I'll tell you, one of our movie which came, it was an amazingly super hit movie, and there was a dean in that movie, and it was an amazing professor and dean, and somehow you have a very similar look to that dean, right? I will say that he's already very popular right now, right, in our country. So thank you, Professor, for, I think Professor Balasingham has already given the introduction to this team. He's from Norway. I think you are in the intervention center. He is doing amazingly good work, and maybe his talk will be interesting maybe in the next day. We have Professor Hayo Ying. He's from Wayne State University, USA. Great, Professor. Thank you so much for coming on. We have Professor Martin Fabian. He's from Chalmers University, Sweden. So thank you, Professor. And we have Professor John, and I thank him 4 times for the opening remarks. So you have set the tone for the session already. We have Radim. Radim has been a very good friend and colleague with me for a long time. We have co-authored many papers. So once again, I invite him. Radim, he's from Brno University of Technology, Czech Republic. He works on artificial intelligence. And also, we have a big round of applause for Professor Radim because he's also the co-chair of this conference. We have Professor Peter Beer. From Slovenia. We are actually co-editing one of the journals in United States, right? So Peter Beer also known to me for a long time. We have Professor Stevens. He's also a very senior person. He is in the University of Canada. He has got very interesting work in biomedical physics, and a lot of his work has also attracted, I think, across the world. A lot of you can see his work and published in citations and all. We have Professor Israel Konai from University of Massachusetts. He has been a wonderful person. He is from the University of Massachusetts. Professor Koren had given 2 talks, and I got the feedback that they were very popular. Students were very much enjoyed the talk. Thank you, Professor Koren, for giving the additional talk once again. We have Professor Gregor Rosnes from Technical University of Bratislava. We have Professor Daniel Rice from Louisiana State University, USA. Thank you, Professor, for coming down. And we have Professor Duan Hong from Sydney Technical University in Australia, right? So thank you, Professor, for joining us. Also request Professor Jason Okani if you can join us. I'm sorry I did not send you an invite. Keep in mind that you are tired. If you're okay, you can join us. Otherwise, if you're okay there. So we also thank Professor Jason Okani, who's been traveling from the United States. Thank you so much. So, I thank maybe Professor Koren, Professor Stephens, and Professor Radim, Professor Balasingham, for traveling multiple times on my request. So they have been traveling maybe second time, Radim maybe 2 times, 3 times. So they have been great colleagues, and they had always taken the pain to come down to India once again. So now we start the panel discussion. I'll give you quickly an overview, and then I request the panelists to have their input. See, already two introductory talks have been given by Professor Balasingham and Professor John. And writing a research paper is a trick in itself. Already explained. Thank you so much for explaining. But as an editor, as an author, as a supervisor, as a reviewer, how you look into the scientific content in itself is a tricky thing. Sometimes a moderate paper gets accepted with less amount of difficulty, maybe the reviewer or whatever, and sometimes amazingly good work struggles to get a publication. So maybe you guys who are getting into research careers and who has got a research bent of mind, you'd like to understand, and I'll request the panelists to tell maybe if it is possible to share a couple of their experience in real life as an editor, as a reviewer, as an author, as a supervisor. So what came across, and those inputs, most of them are engineering students, PTech and MS and PhD students. So it'll be great for them to hear maybe real life experiences if you have something. Or now a scientific paper, you see, you start with an abstract, then you go for the keywords, and then you go for introduction, and you go for a chapter scheme, then you go to the materials and method, you explain your algorithm, you go for the scientific results, you try to validate your claims through so many tables, so many figures, and so many things. Now please understand, in the world, in this world, most of the review process is voluntary. They're not paid. Most of the reviewers are not paid. So please understand, a guy who is not paid, how much amount of effort he's going to take to read your paper. It's not a professional job. So unless and until you give him a reason to accept your paper, actually somebody was telling last, I was holding a panelist and somebody was telling me, rejection is normal. Acceptance is a miracle actually these days. So rejection is pretty normal. So if something is accepted, it's sort of a magic. So with this, I request all the panelists, and I'll request, because there's some time pressure also, maybe 5 to 7 minutes, and quote something which may be useful for our students and audience over here. You can sit in your places. There is a wireless phone, and it can be very informal. You need not go to the desk, and you can stop from the position itself. Right now, the session is open, and after the session, you can ask some questions. Also, if somebody has a question, you can raise your hand, and we will take your question. Maybe somebody will take their question. Thank you once again all for attending. Thank you the panelists for attending. We keep it open right now. So who first? Maybe Radim, or maybe I'll request Professor Socrates. Maybe because he must be very popular or still.
Okay, hello everybody, and sorry we were a little late coming back from our excursion. So I have a few minutes to tell the students the way to write an excellent paper. This is a lecture that I give to my students and postdocs all the time. So I have things in my head, and I wrote a couple of notes here to remind me what I want to tell you. The first and most important thing to remember is that whether you are doing theoretical calculations or experimental measurements, the paper is not about what you calculated or about what you measured. You can't just give them a list of what you have calculated or measured. Nobody wants to know that. What they want to know is what did you learn from your calculations and from your measurements, and what's new relative to what's known already. So you have to frame it in that way. I see way too many things, too many presentations by my own students and postdocs because they are so immersed into what they are doing that they just tell us what they got. And they forget the story. So you have to get the story. You have to structure the flow of the paper in your head. And the best way to do that is to do the figures. You are going to have figures, 4, 5, 6 figures. Design the figures that tell the story. The figures tell the story and the paper. So with that in mind, you set out to write the paper. The first thing, in addition to the abstract, the first thing is an introduction. That's extremely important because that's the first thing that the editor reads and the referee later reads. What's the purpose of the introduction? Well, you know, right? We are going to give some background about what happened before. But there are some very important points there. It's not what we call in America a laundry list. It's not a catalog of this paper did this, and then this paper did that, and then that paper did that. No. What you have to do is to add value to that list. You have to synthesize what is known in 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs. It's not a review paper, but you've got to capture what has happened before that is relevant to what your story is going to be about, and set it in perspective so that then you are ready in the next place after the introduction to say, in this paper, I will do the following. And there your charge is to say what's new relative to what you just presented as a framework about what happened before. And then once you do that, in this important paragraph, in this paper we do, and that's a paragraph that is about double or 2.5 times the length of the abstract. You have a little bit more room to tell what's in this paper, and it provides a roadmap for the reader about what's going to come. The editor or the referee, once he finished reading that paragraph, your introduction and the paragraph, he or she should know immediately whether this is a worthwhile paper. What's new here is important because he just told me what the state of the art is. So once you accomplish that, your paper is in excellent shape. From there on, you have your figures, you have your roadmap in this paper paragraph. You are almost just dump it out because it's all there and you will be done. Simple prescription. Go ahead and do it. I give this lecture all the time. That's why you came out. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Socrates, for your interesting and inputs in this case. So I think it's open. Anyone can pick. Anyone? I still. Professor Stephens already has the mic. Maybe Professor Stephens from University of London. Thank you.
That's better. The first thing you have to make sure, and this is easier for me than it is for you, is to make sure that the English is good enough. Because if I can't understand what you're trying to say, the science behind your paper is, I'm not going to be able to really review it appropriately. And so, for me, yes, we have to have the science there, but you also have to have the English that describes the science in a clear and understandable way. I don't want to have to spend my time as a reviewer wading through the grammar, trying to correct it. There are many tools available to allow you to help improve your grammar, check your spelling, all of these very basic things. They have to be there. Then having said that, even though the paper has an abstract, title first, an abstract, an introduction, I don't believe and I don't recommend to my students that you actually write it in that way. I would start off by looking at what your hypothesis is, coming up with the idea, the framework for the paper, sort of a key message that you want to try to send to the reader. And then I would start with the figures. But I would only use those figures to storyboard, which is a sort of a term that's used quite often in the film industry, storyboard the message that I'm trying to get across to everybody. Then I would start with the methods and materials, because it's a key element of that whole paper. Then and make sure that you're doing that, you don't include the results. And watch out for your tenses. All right? We write about our own work in the past tense. And then you move on to the results, which again have to be clear and precise with good statistical analysis of those results, error bars in your figures, etc. And then you can start to write your discussion and your conclusions, and only then do I suggest you go back and do the introduction. Making sure that you have a good annotated bibliography before you get to that point to make sure that you're not plagiarizing. And I have to emphasize this very strongly, is you must not plagiarize. These days it's very easy to pick that up. If you need to include somebody else's work in your paper, make sure it's cited properly. And I'm going to stop it there for the moment.
Okay. So, Professor Stephen sounded like one of the most difficult reviewer. So, if you're not very fortunate, if your paper goes to him, he has a lot of things to check. So, thank you, Professor, for all your. These are very for the PhD students and MS students. These inputs are very, very worthy, and they can definitely have a note of it. So, I think Professor Korean has already the mic. Yeah. It will be nice if any of the panelists shares a real life example, like an example with a PhD student or MS student publishing, how it got accepted. Anyone, if anyone has an interesting story to tell. Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, I have to mention that I don't resemble any Indian movie stars, so I don't expect a big applause when I'm done.
Professor Korean, I'll just interrupt you for a while. Our Honorable Vice Chancellor has come into the stage and I request him to join in the stage. So please do.
Thank you.
So we thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor who has taken out his time from his all busy schedule. For all the panelists, let me tell you, this is a very big university, one of the biggest universities in the country, and our Vice Chancellor is a very busy person. Still, I once again thank you for joining this panel. Thank you so much for coming. So, Professor Korean, you can start.
So I'll start with some very general principles that are widely recognized and known, but they are so important that it might be worthwhile to repeat them, unless they were already mentioned by the previous speakers here. And then I'll continue some detailed comments that I learned from after working with my PhD and MS students, and also as part of my work as editor of several light journals. So let's start with the general comments. first and foremost, before you write a paper, do a detailed literature survey. It's the easiest task for a viewer to reject your paper if they suspect that it's very similar to the papers that they've written or somebody else has written, or even, and you don't explain the differences, or even worse, you don't even reference this paper. It's an immediate reject, they don't have to read the entire paper. Secondly, the abstract is probably the most important part of the paper, and what is less known is that you should write it after you finish everything else. The abstract is a summary of the paper, and if you don't have a paper, you don't know how to summarize it. So first finish the paper and then write the summary. The significance of the introduction was already mentioned, so there's no point in repeating it. But the next point, although it was mentioned, I would like to stress it. The paper should read like a story. It doesn't mean that you need to have a bad guy and a good guy fighting over a girl. That's not the purpose. The idea is to have continuity or some linear progression, as was mentioned before. So one sentence leads to the other. You don't jump from one topic to another topic in midway. It needs to read flawlessly and in a linear fashion. Let me now move to more detailed, specific comments. Some of them are often overlooked. Notations in the book, in the paper, are very important. And so, for example, I'll mention some of the principles that I try to pass to my students. Don't use the same letter for two different things in the paper. That's a common mistake, and it's very confusing for the reader or the reviewer. Don't define a notation or an acronym if it's only used once. Many students love acronyms. So they put them right and left and then from all the acronyms you cannot see the forms. Thirdly, don't use unnecessarily sub and superscript. Student thinks that if they use those, it looks more mathematical, more scientific. That's not the case. Try to keep your notation simple so the reviewer will not have to sketch ahead and try to understand what you have behind this notation. Let's now focus on how do you present the results. Always prefer figures over tables. Tables are very difficult to read. Nobody basically reads them. Figures are easy to understand. And if you cannot possibly use a figure to present the results, use a bar chart. Try to avoid tables. In a figure, don't make it too busy. Limit the number of curves to 4, so if you have too many curves, you cannot see what's happening there. Don't include figures just because you generate them during your research. Every figure that is included in the paper must have a conclusion drawn based on it. If there's no conclusion, it means this figure shouldn't be included in the paper. And finally, my last suggestion, once you are done, ask somebody else, a colleague, besides your advisor, to read the paper, preferably somebody who doesn't know exactly the details and will be able to see if he or she can understand and follow your logic. Thank you.
So, Professor Koren, thank you so much. He's from University of Massachusetts. I'll tell you a story about Professor Koren. Last time you forgot to tell that, so I'll tell that on your behalf. So, Professor Koren, his full name is Professor Israel Koren, and I tell you, a country was named after him. So you forgot to tell that. So, in the last time, so a country is named after Professor Israel Koren. Anyway, thank you, Professor Koren. It was very interesting. You see, if your paper do not read like a story. So if your paper do not, sound like an interesting story, why should somebody read your paper? And if somebody do not read your paper, I mean, you see, the fact is, if you write a paper and nobody is reading that paper, as good as not publishing it. Anyway, thank you so Radim? Yeah. So Radim is a good friend of mine from us many years ago. And he works on artificial intelligence. We have a talk from him tomorrow in Aktu. So we look forward to talk also, Radim. Great.
Yeah, thank you. I agree absolutely with the what others suggested, that all the papers have to have a story and have to have a idea behind. And there was as well mentioned that to do a review, it's actually voluntary work. So why we are doing that? Why all of us are doing that? Let's start to think about the value of your paper from the opposite side, from the side of the reviewer. What is he checking for the first? Is what's the novelty of the paper? And the novelty of the paper from the point of view a new method or the application of a method to the new area. Time to time it happens that both can be new. However, at minimum, one of them needs to be novel. In other case, the reviewer knows, after reading the abstract, knows that this paper is most probably about to be rejected. After reading some details, he will be sure that this paper has no any additional value. So before maybe starting the writing paper, try to find out what's the novelty of the paper and how it contributes to the current state of the art. What's new from the paper, and as well this must be told to the reviewer, since no one knows everything about the paper, and even if the author of the paper don't know what's the novelty of the paper, how the reviewer can know that. So that's basically in really short. I would say it is impossible to tell how to write papers, since it's actually about a PhD study of years at our university. However, in brief, I see that this is the most common problem.
Okay, so thank you, Professor. Actually, I would like to, you need to acknowledge and be grateful to people. 2013, when I was co-authoring a paper with Radim, he was saying so many comments to me in multimedia tools and application we had a paper. And let me acknowledge in a public platform that I really owe a lot to Radim for his inputs, and that has given me the skills of writing that novelty. He's always behind that novelty, the contribution, where it should be. And it's like a method, it's like a formula on the basis of which you do. And thank you, Radim, for your personal support in my professional thing. Next. Professor Don Hong from Sydney University of Technology, Australia. Thank you, Professor. And interestingly, the point is, let me make it clear, that almost the whole world is here. There's a guy from Professor from Australia, from US, from Europe. So inputs are from all parts of the world. So it's an interesting, I think the proceedings will be really interesting because all inputs coming from all parts of the world. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah, it's not only from Australia, but I'm also from Vietnam, which is it's not English is not my first language. So I learned a lot by doing PhD like you people, and also I supervise a lot of students, PhD students, probably about 30 of them by now. I learned a lot. So basically, it's like an AI thing. We're doing well because we learn how to adapt, how to make it better every time we do something. Right? So my advice is that if you want to produce a quality paper, you got to read quality papers. Okay? I see a lot of students read very low quality papers. They can never produce any good quality paper whatsoever. It's not about, say, what constitutes a quality paper, and you learn from that. Therefore, you know what is a quality paper. You can produce that. Right? So the second thing that I want to mention is that, say, a paper is you got to solve what you call an important problem. Okay? So you got to know what is the important problem, and then your solution. Is there something new in there? Right? If it's not something new, reviewer know all that already there. So if you repeated something or improve a little bit something from some other paper, then it's not that interesting. And more importantly is the significance of this result. Okay? Because you got the result, what does it do? Right? will not imply any significant development further in the future. Right? So it's very important in the sense that, what constitutes an important problem in your field, you should know that. So what is important? If you're not doing that thing there, prevent a lot of things to happen in the future. So that's why important. If you don't do that, there's something disaster or something that cost you a lot later, whatever that, right? But then what's new? So that's what this thing. So now, and another other bit that I want to sort of share with you is that as a reviewer, right? So these days, they search the database, the keyword to find the reviewer. So your keyword had to be very relevant to your paper. Otherwise, they select the wrong reviewer. Therefore, your paper doesn't mean anything to the wrong reviewer. So it's not getting there. Right? So that is important because the reviewer, they select the reviewer, and the reviewer is not just one to review your paper. They read the abstract, and the abstract doesn't mean anything to them. Right? They can reject it easily because this one doesn't seem very significant, so they get rid of it. Right? So that kind of thing it's not a technical bit, but it's how to get your paper published because you actually choose the right journal, okay, that's relevant to your result, your work, and the right keyword to get the right reviewer, the right abstract, so that the reviewer finds that of interest to me and also interest to the reader. That's why after they read the abstract and the introduction, they already see that more than 50% they know what you know, that they probably will publish your paper. They check the body, they check the conclusion to see whether you actually do what you actually say in the introduction. If you do that, they get through very quickly. That's all I want to share.
Thank you, Professor. So Professor Theda Daniel Rice is from Louisiana State University. So you can have it first, please.
Well, I must say thank you, first of all, to Professor Dutta and to, as the organizer and his associates, I am literally honored to be here. In fact, I've enjoyed Lucknow so much, I enjoy the traffic. So hence our taxi was a little, delayed in coming because that's what we were in, but even that was fun. And to, of course, the esteemed Vice Chancellor and Administrator, thank you so much. So, and many new colleagues and friends I've met. I guess what I want to say is to begin, everything I've heard is phenomenal. You all, if you haven't, and I heard you, maybe you know this, but I will tell you, you are very fortunate, very blessed, whatever term you like to use, to have individuals at this stage in your career to give you this kind of information. This is not, shall we say, the norm. Coming from the States. And my background is I went to Rice University as an undergraduate. It's a very strong, excellent university for engineering in particular. And then I did my master's at Stanford on the West Coast, and then I did my doctorate at one of the Ivy League institutions, Cornell, on the East. So I did this. And then I went down to Duke University as a professor for a number of years, about a decade and a half almost. And now I'm at Louisiana State University. So I've kind of everywhere except for the Midwest, at least as far as the U.S. goes. And so what I say all that to tell you, as you probably can obviously notice, there's an old expression in a children's show we had in the States where they would say, one of these things is not like the other. And you had to figure out which one it was. Okay, so that being said, my point is to tell you that as all has been said in terms of the technicalities of the paper, in terms of most certainly, I always tell my students you're looking to tell a story, keeping the attention, keeping certainly the English and all that you're learning. You are unique. So what is unique that you are presenting about your work? And that literally begins with you and recognition of the fact that certainly you are a special person, you have accomplished a great deal, you have overcome, and to get to the point, to university and beyond. But in that work, what you are bringing to be unique and to be explored and to be shared. Because your uniqueness may not always be, it's the greatest scientific, exposition, but it may be the fact that you have come to the point of doing what you do and doing it well and taking such advice and following your mentors And just accomplishing those steps at that point is a unique thing. Because in that children's show of one of these things is not like the other, there's a second line, is one of these things doesn't belong. And so you have to figure out, even if it's not, you're not like the others, and maybe there are some who don't think you belong. For example, when I began as a professor in the 90s, I know that sounds ancient to some of you, but I was the only woman in the entire School of Engineering at my university, whether it was electrical, mechanical, civil, I was it. I was the first faculty member to have a child. You know, clutch heavens to Betsy, didn't know what to do with me, but all these things. We have 2 children, as a matter of fact, my husband and I. So there were a lot of things that were different for a lot of people, right? That they had not experienced with someone that looked differently, rather, and so forth. So you have to take whatever is your uniqueness, your heart, your mind, put that together into your work. And never, ever, ever let others tell you that you don't belong, because you're certainly already accomplished in being here. And I'll tell you one quick story about, I've had many international students, and I had one student, I believe he was from West Bengal University, I think. I don't know if that's a rival, but that's where he was from. And he was excellent, brilliant young man, excellent student, and he wrote a paper, and it was very well done, and I'm extremely particular about the grammar and the English and so forth. I came up doing, I have my geek side, my science engineering side, then I have my artistic side, and I have my sort of literature side. So I'm very, very particular, particularly in the right, comma. I've had students say, how could you see that? The whole dissertation on page 20, you're missing a comma on that second sentence. And so, but this student had written this wonderful paper, and it went forward, and I could tell that the reviewer was probably a young professor starting out who wanted to show that, he or she knew some stuff. Came back, the reviewer had 9 questions, and each question had 3 parts. And my student freaked out. He was like, what happened? I said, first, I said, calm down. He said, answer the questions. Just go through it. Yes, and sometimes things will come back from a reviewer that they didn't quite get or are not quite appropriate, or maybe even, if you want to say not quite fair, whatever. But deal with it. There's a way to say even sometimes to the reviewer, you are incorrect, sir or madam, but you can't just go, you're an idiot, which is about what he wanted to say. But we went through and he wrote all of his answers and then went forward. And then another thing we've experienced, and the paper was published, but one thing we've experienced sometimes with journals is they'll see a name that's not an American or a European name, and they will assume that the English is poor. And so we got this email back from this particular journal saying that you need the English, you need to do this. Now, the email that came back had English that was not quite correct. It was actually poor. And my student as well, who had excellent, he had grammatical skills, and myself, I can write well, I think, and speak well. We looked at it. I said, let me answer this. So we answered and described that I was a native English speaker and so forth, and, had won awards for writing and speaking and such and such. And I wouldn't necessarily say do this, but it makes for a bit of a funny story. I said, so at the end of my email, I said, and if you will allow me, I have taken the liberty of making a few corrections to the inquiry that has been forwarded, and I proceeded to, in red and with yellow highlight, all of their grammatical errors that they sent to us in the email. And we sent the email back, and my student comes back and goes, Dr. Race, 30 seconds, the paper's published. They came back and was, you're accepted. So, but there's a way to do it, right? To say sometimes, that wasn't right, and I wouldn't, don't do that. That's after many years in gray hair. I was like, wow, I'll do that. But the point is, my bottom line is, learn from your mentors, learn from your advisors, take what is uniquely you, believe in yourself as early as you can, because frankly in science engineering, you can get pretty beat up. I've got my share of scars, they may be invisible. You can get pretty beat up, but don't forget that you're here for a reason. You've earned that. and continue that in both your intellect and in your, shall I say, poetically speaking, your heart, to be the best scientist, the best engineer that you can be. You can do all the technical work, you can be the most brilliant person in the world, but as I was telling someone earlier, if you're a jerk, it's going to come out somewhere. So follow what you know, as your parents maybe have taught you of being a good person, do all the technical work, do excellent science, and you should be just fine.
Invaluable, these words are really invaluable because, when it comes from somebody as experienced as her, we really need to, these are takeaway points for the discussion. Thank you, Professor. So, yeah, Professor Gregor,
okay,
from the University of Bratislava.
Thank you very much. First of all, to Professor that I was able to come here for the invitation. It's really a great pleasure and honor for me to be here, so thank you very much. I'm, as mentioned, from Slovak University of Technology, Bratislava, Slovakia. Slovakia is a very small country in comparison to India. We have only 5 million inhabitants, so such a small village in India only. But we have a technical university. I would like to give two questions and to try to answer to these two questions. The first question is how to distinguish, how to find out that a paper is good. And the second question is why do we write actually papers? What for? So the first question, I don't know about the university here. I know about our university and many other universities in the world. And I'm afraid that none of the universities in the world taking care about the quality of papers in this manner. They take care, of course, but they ask PhD students, you should have, at least at our university, you should have papers in category A, B, C, D, at least one or two in A, some in B, and so on. Nobody is asking about, do you have abstract in your paper? Or is your abstract good? Or do you have a story in your paper? No, you should have A, B, C. So you would like to pass your exam or your PhD study, and you should have 1, 2, 3 papers in a category A, for instance. What does it mean, category A? Category A means that you should have a paper in a journal which is either in Scopus or Web of Science or Google Scholar now or some other databases. You should have impact factor greater than something. You should have a current content journal or many others. So you have to prepare a paper in a journal that is acceptable for your university to give you a PhD degree. So this is a very pragmatic view. This is not a scientist view like good abstract and so on, but that's the way. And actually it's not very easy to distinguish what is a good journal. So if you would like to make a paper in good journal because they ask you to have it, what is a good journal? Is it impact factor? Is it Scopus? Is it Web of Science? Yes, there are some databases, and if it is a journal on Web of Science and impact factor is greater than 5 or X, then it's a good journal. Then we have journal like Nature. Nature doesn't need to be in any database. It's journal, and everybody knows that it's excellent journal. So this is a tough work for the university to prepare some conditions for this ABC, how to make some qualification of these journals, and then for the students and for the researcher, how to publish in these journals and to find a good journal. So this is not an easy way. The second question, what I wanted to ask, why do we write papers? And I hear already the answer, because I am PhD student and I need to write ABC papers. Because my university wants that I publish, and then I obtain PhD degree. This is not true. This is only the way the university forces us to publish. Why? Because, I'm from technical university and we have 3 degrees of study, bachelor, master and PhD. And we teach them in general, like in some work of engineers or technician, because we are a technical university. And I always say to my students, making a research or doing an engineer job means that you need to fulfill 3 conditions or 3 parts of your research. The first is research itself, and it's many times the easiest part of your research. The second is make a good documentation, and the third is to make a good presentation. So that's why we make theses, bachelor theses, master theses, PhD theses, and that's why we make also publications and presentation of the research. And this is the main point, that if you want that your research will continue somehow, you should make a paper and you should present your results in front of the research community, that they can continue in your work. And only one thing to the paper as a structure of the paper. Many speakers mentioned already figures. Figures are really very important in the paper. And what is very important, that you should make a reasonable amount of figures in your paper, so not too few and not too many. And the quality or the content of the every figure must be clear. So if you have, for instance, a lot of research, a lot of measurements, and you have 100 graphs, let's say, don't put only 1 or 2 graphs. Don't put 100 graphs in your presentation or in your paper. Try to find out how to put the result of these 100 graphs to one table or one image or one graph. Make something that will show this is the result of all 100 measurements I did. And try to make it clear for the reviewer and for the reader. Thank you very much.
So, thank you, Professor. Again, very interesting that you said that. I say the paper has to be readable. The readability on the paper has to be very high. So you should know how much should be the running text and how much should be the figures. Maybe the figures and the graphs and the tables interpret more and have more visibility for everyone. So thank you for your input. Now we have some time pressure also, so I request the remaining speakers to be a little brief because we have some time pressure. Maybe Peter, yeah. So you can also, me and Peter and Carlos, who is coming tomorrow, we are co-editing, we are guest editors in one of the IEEE Excel journals. You can publicize that also because I'm also involved there. So please, thank you.
Thank you. While I was listening to all the esteemed speakers so far, and also noticing that I'm probably among the youngest, I was asking myself, what could I add, right? But since in heart I'm an engineer, and engineers we like to do the checklists, right? I wrote my checklist like others did, and I was just scanning through, and I said, oh, I'm on the right path. Everything is there. The story, the plot, the contributions, the figures, so good. That's kind of a confirmation that I'm doing it right. But still, the question remained, what can I actually add here? And perhaps the right question to answer to my question would be to ask you, how many of you are students here actually? Raise your hands. Okay, majority. If I ask only the undergraduate and master students, how many of those? Much less. Okay, so a lot of you are PhD students, right? So basically that means that, okay, you had a course on how to write probably a manuscript. If I ask for instance, just to start, there is a famous abbreviation, IMRAD. What does that mean? You know? How many of you know what IMRAD is? IMRAD. Really? Because we talked about it, right? Introduction, method, results, and discussion. Okay? We didn't get far because in the section of methods, we didn't discuss the details, but we said a lot about, well, the extract and the introduction, and what the introduction has to have in order to convince, well, us as the authors, and on the other side, the reviewers and the editing the editorial office, right? Because it's true, if you don't form the introduction right, me, as a reviewer, will scan the rest, not read it thoroughly. This is bad for the authors, right? So I have a cheat sheet as well. Some of the things were not mentioned, so I'll just try to mention a few of them because we don't have much time, right? Professor Dutta, right? Not much time, so I'll mention two things and then I'll pass the mic on. Okay, good. So far we didn't talk much about the supervision. What I've learned over the last 10 years as a head of the biometrics group and now also the head of the computer vision lab is that what is the most important thing for the success within the group is having a good atmosphere. If that is not part of the whole deal, then one-to-one discussion is just not enough. I strongly believe that regular meetings where we all sit together and we also learn from one another is really important. So I don't have meetings only with one PhD student because we are somehow related in terms of methodology and similar things, and we do things together, and we actually learn from each other. I mean, I learn from them, they learn from me, okay? What else should I mention as point number 2? Perhaps I should go back to the introduction of Professor Dutta. He said that we are co-editing a special section, as it's named, a special issue in IEEE Access. And I was kind of disappointed with first submissions because the name of the special issue is clearly bio-inspired, image-based, deep learning, blah, 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 whatever. But nobody was saying anything in the papers about bio-inspired thing. So they just thought that, okay, since it's deep learning and everything is kind of correlated with how the brains operate, that's enough. But it's actually not enough. So they have to be more specific. So you have to be careful about it as well. Okay. I have many more points, but since we have a time pressure, I'll just pass the microphone. But if somebody wants to talk to me about those points later on, I'm here for the next 3-4 days. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Peter. So now we have some time to conclude it. Next 10 minutes, so the other speakers have to be accommodated, has to be brief. Thank you, Professor Peter. Thank you. Maybe Professor Aman Sophia, yeah? Oh, Professor Vera. Yeah. And three people left. So Professor Vera and Professor Martin and Professor Javi. Maybe I will request you to be a little brief, because most of the things have been said. It makes a like.
Yes. So we were asked to be brief, so I tried to shorten my input. When we are talking about publication, we are talking about accepting your work by the community, and it's I consider it's very important because it's crucial for your work. And there are many good advices and many important things when we are talking about publications. But I would like to stress some of them, which are very personal. So let me tell you some very personal things which I consider as important for writing the good paper. I think it is attitude. Many PhD students and many researchers, they say that, well, I like the research work and I like to propose the new solutions, but I don't like writing papers. It's very boring and it's something which is really bad. But when you don't change this attitude, it will not be success. So writing the paper is also creative work. It's really very nice work. You are telling the story about what you have done, and you are proud of it because it's really something what you are happy with it. And another personal advice is to take time enough. So don't procrastinate. Start really very early, and then it will be fun for you. So these are my advices. Maybe some short practical advices that, of course, you have to do the outline. It's better to write the whole draft, not to iterate one part. And well, maybe this is. And maybe one more thing: the experiments. It's quite easy for you to write because you know it, you have done them. So I think you can write the experiments part as the first, and then you are in the written and you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Professor Howley from Wayne State University. Okay, Professor Martin Pevin from Chalmers University, Sweden. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so I have also brought some notes that I give a lecture for my PhD students, and I'm not going to go through them all, don't worry. I'll just focus on a few brief things. One important thing that was touched upon earlier, but hasn't really been mentioned, I think we need to mention much more. To learn to write, we need to read a lot. So we must read. It was mentioned that we should read good research papers. Yes, we should. But it doesn't really matter what we read, I think. We should read good authors. And one of the best books that I have myself been reading, and I tell all my PhD students, on writing. The title of the book is On Writing. And it is by a quite famous guy called Stephen King. It's a thin book, but very full of advice, which is valid also for technical writing. And the main point that I'm taking away from there is sort of an abbreviation of what I've mentioned several times here. Show, don't tell. Tables are telling, figures are part of the show. You don't say that my method is novel, you show that it's novel, because there is no reference, useful references that actually illustrate something similar. You show, you don't tell. And that is what makes the story. And final thing here. The title is the shortest abstract. Be very, very careful with your title. Rephrase your title several ways. Consider exactly what message it conveys. Because it is the abstract is not the first thing that a reviewer or anyone reads. It's the title. And if that title doesn't capture the reader, the abstract may, but it's much better, of course, if the title actually captures the attention of the reader.
Thank you. So, maybe last but not the least, Professor Howley is from Wayne State University, United States.
First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Dieter for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. I think I'd like to add another dimension for this panel. So I'm the associate editor for 4 journals and also on editorial board for 3 additional journals. So the associate editor including 2 IEEE transactions, one is on funny systems, the other is system and cybernetics systems. So I'd like to share a little bit my experience, what happened after your paper is submitted to the journal. So you submit your paper, the paper goes to the editor-in-chief. Editor-in-chief knows the expertise areas each and every associate editors. So the paper your paper will be sent to the associate editor that has the expertise on your paper. So once you submit paper, within a few days, I received email from the journal reminding me a new paper had been added to my assignment. So I take a look. So the first thing I have, as associate editor, I have a right to reject your paper outright. Of course, it must be based on valid reasons. So one reason is the poor English. Okay, I can write without any review. The paper will not go to review. The second reason is the paper doesn't match the scope of the journal. That happens quite often. Okay, you submit your paper to the journal, it doesn't fit to the readership of the journal. So I can reject your paper. So my advice for you is before you submit your paper to a particular journal, check to make sure the journal has published similar papers to yours, okay, to make sure that matches. Then the last one is I can reject your paper if your paper is not innovative enough relative to the literature that I know. Okay, so I can reject the papers. Then once I decide to say the paper should go through the review process, I tell you that the reviewer has a choice: accept without just accept as is. The first choice. Second is accept with minor editorial revision. The third is major revision. The fourth is major revision. The fourth is rejection, but encourage you to resubmit. The fifth is outright rejection. Okay, so 3 reviews are needed, and so then I will invite the reviewers. Okay, so remember these reviewers are volunteers. So the default time they have is 1 month to review your paper. And so let's say I send out the reviews within a couple of days. I got enough reviews to accept the invitation. And then if the review past due date, it doesn't submit, then for a good journal like Aktu Transactions, it will notify me saying the review is overdue. So if the Associated works hard, then we'll log in the system and then send a reminder to the reviewer. Typically give a couple of weeks because these reviews are very busy. Okay, then you wait. Then if the review still doesn't submit a review in this 2 weeks time, the system will send you another reminder. So I can give another 2 weeks. Okay. So the lesson to you is sometimes you ask me when should I inquire the status of my paper and the review. I think I would say about 3 months. If you don't hear anything from the journal, you should inquire that. Because if you don't inquire, if the associated is lazy, your paper just left it there, just waste time. Okay, so you do that, and once the review comes back, if there's two major revision, 1 rejection, I will reject your paper. Okay, if there are 3 major revision, then I will recommend a major revision. Okay. I cannot accept the paper if there's 1 major revision. Okay, ideally must be like 2 accept as is or plus 1 accept with minor revision. I don't have the power to override that because my recommendation goes to the editor chief who will have the final say. So I just like to add the information what happened after you submit the paper. Thank you.
So thank you all the panelists for your very valuable input. We are open for some quick questions because we have some time pressure. So we are open for some quick questions. Anybody has a question, you can raise your hand. We can put the mic for you. Maybe any questions, please?
One of you can volunteer also. One of the students can come and volunteer. You can come in front and ask the question. Please.
If anyone, can you come forward? We will hand over the mic, please. You tell your name and your branch.
My name is Aktu from SR College, BKT.
Branch.
Electronic and Communication. And from my questions, I applied to patent any project. How to apply the process?
No, but that is not a relevant question. We are talking about more of research skills. That question is not relevant.
मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है सर कि अगर मुझे पेपर पब्लिश कराना है या उसमें कैसे मैं कंटेंट क्या दूं जिससे वो इफेक्टिव हो.
बट इसमें तो हम लोगों ने अभी तक डिस्कस किया है.
सर यही बोल रहे थे कि मतलब कि हमें क्या रिव्यू करना चाहिए, कैसे कंटेंट्स रखने चाहिए जिससे हमारे रीजन जो होते हैं रिजेक्ट होते हैं.
You can take. We will take it offline. This is written. Anyone else, please? Yeah. Can anyone hand over the mic?
A very good evening to all of you. My name is Shafiqur Rahman, and I'm pursuing Electronics and Communication Engineering. First of all, I'm very grateful to AKTU for this precious opportunity. And my question is, suppose I would like to work with any professor, and I would like to write an email to that professor, then what should be the structure of that email? Thank you.
But this is once again an irrelevant question, and out of the theme of the discussion, we are more open to ask a question about research paper writing skills. We'll take your question offline. If anyone has a question relevant to the theme of the panel discussion.
Hello, I am research scholar of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, Technical University, Lucknow. I am pursuing PhD in Mechanical Engineering Department. My question is, how can I validate experimental result, analytical result, and software result? Example is if I use for software MATLAB. So how can we validate them? Analytical result and software with helping of software result and with helping of experimental result.
Okay, Professor John.
Okay, there's something called, there's different methods for different types of problems. But there's one universal problem that is not well understood, so let me just tell you what it is. So there's something called a power analysis. So a power analysis applies when you're doing an experiment and you've got a control group and then you have an experimental group, like you give some people a drug and you want to know if that drug is helpful. But what you need to know is how many subjects you need. How big does the trial have to be? Do you need 1 million subjects? Do you need 5 subjects? And this is something that is very poorly, in my opinion, very poorly understood. And if you're in this situation, come and talk to me or send me an email and I'll tell you how to do it.
Thank you, Professor John. Any more questions, please? Yeah.
Good evening, respected panel. My name is Satyam Gupta. I am from SRMCM Lucknow. I am an undergraduate student of 3rd year. So my question is, in the undergraduate, we are not really focused on the research work. So when we write any research work, and the instruments and the equipments we use are not very standard. So when we use them, does it somehow lag our research work and research paper? And does it matter from what qualification point of view we are writing? Is the accepted in the community or not?
Question is a little difficult to understand, but let me take it. Undergraduate students are also opting for courses like ISR, independent study research courses, and also I don't think this is a very relevant question for the panel. Any more questions, please? Or we have to close it next 5 minutes? Yeah.
Good evening, sir. My name is Shahid Mustafa Hashmi. I am pursuing Electronics and Communication Engineering. I'm in 2nd year. Just wanted to ask the name of the e-book that sir told.
You mentioned something.
Strong and White.
Strong and White.
Strong and White.
It's a very
famous little book. It's white. It's written by a man by the
name White. Yeah, exactly. It's a white. Yeah, the cover page is white. I think you can just Google and download it. It's a PDF. It's available for free. It's a very little, tiny little book explaining about all the pits and falls that particularly we make and how to avoid, writing, how to write a good paper, avoiding all these mistakes. Just download it from Google.
Okay, any more questions, please, in the theme of the conference?
Yeah, actually, I have a question. I'm a research scholar of AKTU Center for Advanced Studies. References are a part of the paper. So, the flagship, can you give any light on the flagship thing and all? Because sometimes that also happened, the proper introduction of the references leads to the cancellation of paper.
So maybe, I don't know if any panelists have understood the question, take that.
So, something that hasn't been mentioned that is critically important is to write your papers in LaTeX.
Some people have heard of this horrible writing tool called Microsoft Word. If you own Microsoft Word, burn it. Now, LaTeX is considered to be a difficult thing. It's got a steep learning curve. That's true. But it becomes much easier if you go to a website called overleaf.com, and they've got everything there. It looks like Microsoft Word in terms of how you can type it in, or you can look at the raw LaTeX. Now, regarding your question, there's something called BibTeX, which is a sub-program as part of LaTeX. And using Google Scholar, and you can find the BibTeX format for every single paper that's ever been written, and you can just copy it into your BibTeX file, and then LaTeX Overleaf will automatically include it in your document, and you'll have equations, you have everything. It looks nice, it looks fantastic. That's a very important thing. We haven't talked about that. The paper should look good. And if you write it in Microsoft Word, the caption goes on a different page than the figure. Come on!
Actually, this is exactly what I tell my PhD students and the research fellows who works with me, that the paper doesn't look good. You should get a feel. The reviewer should get a feel. The moment he looks at it. That's what Professor John is telling. Thank you, Professor, for answering the question. Any more questions? Maybe we'll take 2 more questions, and then, yes. It might be relevant to the panel discussion, please.
Hello everyone, I am Dr. Priyanshu Verma. My question is related to the journal and preprints. Like whether it is always necessary to publish article in journals, as we know it takes a lot of time. And if we go for printing, then it is quite easier. And our prime objective is to dissipate the information. So through preprint we can do the same thing. So why it is necessary to...
Once again, it is not in the,
No, I think it's
anyone has...
because lots of...
It's a very fundamental question. Of course we understand.
Because I personally believe like journal has just become a business nowadays. Thank you.
So,
I have one last question, sir.
just to answer about submitting a journal versus to a conference. So let's say that you submit to a conference. Of course, it takes at least 3 to 6 months to get, depending on type of conference. Big IEEE flagship conferences takes maybe 6 months, and typically the decision is binary. So it means that accept, reject. So if you submit to a journal, as the professor here mentioned, that you have different type of reviews. They'll give you your comments and everything from accept to minor to major, maybe rejected with some comments saying that please submit the paper if you can address all these things. The good thing about submitting the journal is that it goes through a very rigorous peer review process. Conferences also do that. We try to have at least 2 or 3 reviewers to look into your papers, but sometimes we don't get enough people to do that just because of the time constraint. So journals are much better, it's rigorous. Depending on type of journals also, you mentioned that there's a big business also when it comes to certain journals, unfortunately. But you should always try to go to the good journals having good reputation in the field and go for them. And I think it's a long term for your own career. If you publish your work in a very low ranking conferences and journals, most likely your career is going to be very difficult later on if you want to go for something like a postdoc or even for a faculty position.
Okay, thank you. Maybe one last question.
Of course. So I have a bit of a comment, quick comment here. So I also think it depends, or I know it depends on the disciplines. If we talk about many conferences or journals, many computer science conferences have like 15% acceptance rate. Most of the control engineering conferences that I submit to, we have like 45, 60% acceptance rate. So depending on the discipline, a conference is or is not much harder to get into than a journal, get a journal publication. That said, I agree with everything that was already said with the rigorous review and everything of journal papers is absolutely necessary. But I think we have to, especially if you go to very well-renowned computer science conferences, we have to take into account that those are hard to get into.
Anyway, thank you. Maybe one last question.
One question is that how do you think that softwares like Trinity are they helpful in writing, doing the writing skills, or someone who is naturally writing and writing 500 papers is possible for him to change the language of introduction in every paper? So the question is it useful that alternative is useful or detrimental to writing a paper?
Anyone could? I will repeat the question for what he's asking. He's asking if we use anti-plagiarism software like Trinity. So, I mean, how helpful or how is it really helping or is it deteriorating the quality of the paper? That's what you're asking, right? Yes. So I made it simple for the panelists. Maybe this is the last question. If anybody can take this, please. Anyone, please?
I can't answer that because in the attribute system you already have, how to check whether similar paper has.
But he's asking something else. He's asking, does this kind of anti-plagiarism software, compels you to destroy the paper? That's what is your question, right?
So it's about similarity, right?
He's talking about similarity, that's right.
So I think IEEE transactions, they all have the software installed. And so from time to time, I got assignments with the report, a similarity report. Okay? So it showed me for the submitted paper compared to all the papers in the literature, and which paper this paper is similar to, and what's the percentage. And they even mark the line. I can see the lines. So sometimes these similar papers are papers published by the same authors, okay, like a conference or something. But sometimes it could be different authors. So then, as associated, I have the power to determine what to do with the paper. So usually it should be similar. It should be less than 10%. Okay, as low as possible. But if it's 15%, if I feel it's a subjective call, if I feel that even the same author, like the conference compared to journal, of course, right? If too much similarity, even like 15%, I just don't like it. At least it tells me the authors are lazy. Okay? That's not acceptable. Then I can reject it outright. The paper won't go through the process.
Maybe the last comment from Professor John.
So I have a very close friend, and he wrote his PhD thesis, and about 5 years later, we discovered there was like 2 pages that were copied directly from a paper that I wrote. This was a most embarrassing thing, and we decided not to do anything except to confront him with this fact. And he told me, and he's a close friend of mine, and I believe him, he said he had no idea that this had happened. He was reading my paper, and he liked it, and he copied it down, and then months or even more later, he found this, and he thought that he'd written it, and he loved it, so he put it in his paper.
Okay, so...
Can I add quickly? So in that case, so even you publish a conference paper, okay, it's similar, so make sure you, at least in journal paper, you cite your conference paper. The worst is you don't cite your own paper. You try to hide the fact that that's even the worst.
So with this, I thank all the panelists for the invaluable inputs, and can we now have a huge round of applause for all the panelists. Now it is my responsibility to invite our Vice Chancellor for the final remark on the panel discussion. We will close it. I'll just introduce our Vice Chancellor to the panelists and the people over to the panelists. He is an amazing leader, and the university that you are sitting here has been the construction, the administration thing, the academics, everything. And he has been, in India it's really difficult to push things. So he has taken a lot of effort. He is a vice chancellor for the last 12 years, which is once again a great, recognition to his academic efforts in this country. He is a very popular person in the entire country, and it's our great privilege that he's sitting with us next week. And I request Professor Vinay Kumar Patel, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Abdul Kalam Technical, to have the final remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Gupta, for inviting such a galaxy of people sitting on the dais and off the dais for such a wonderful conference. I think this technical university is having this conference due to the hard work done by Professor Datta, and this is one of the first conference of its own kind where we have got so many galaxy of speakers who have come here and taken their time. I really want to just put my strong thanks to everybody, and we are a good host also, trying to host you here. The only thing which has happened in the thing that we had a concurrent defense expo, which we were not doing when the conference was started, and this defense expo happens to be 40 countries and 40 defense ministers. The 40 countries' defense ministers are also there at this time in Lucknow. Lucknow is a small city having n number of less hotels and the accommodations, but still we found a good place. I think all of you are comfortable, and if you are not, if you have got some problem, I owe that responsibility on myself, but we are trying to make you as comfortable as we can do. I think I want to thank at a certain point all the speakers. All of us will be here for 3 days, and this is a great opportunity for this university, for the students of university, the faculty of university, and the principal of university. This university has got 786 affiliating colleges. I don't know whether a lot of people knows about the affiliating university, but this is one of the university which has got some 2.5 lakh students studying with us doing their BTech, Masters and PhD degrees. And we have invited out of them by choice, more than 4,000 people have enrolled in different kind of sessions which are there. So I think it will be a wonderful synergy between the students, the researchers and the professors to be here. We will try, and our team will also try to make you as comfortable as we can. And if there is any problem, we are being Professor Datta and I am always there 24/7 to help you out. But Lucknow is a very good place, and this part of the country also has got a lot of things. It has got a corridor and Taj Mahal and all other things are there. It has got another part where most of the wildlife is there, and this part, I think most of the people have heard about Ayodhya and all these places. These are also there at this part kind of thing. So the UP, Uttar Pradesh is, I think, a very big place, and geographically also, it can be, the size and the width and the population can contain 12 to 13 European countries in together. Such a big kind of our territory is there. The last thing which I want to say, and it's important because this, I want to also express, I'm not a researcher as the people sitting on the dais are. But the only important thing about the research which I wanted to say, I want to express is, as the Mother Nature has created the human species, and they have made a different signature for everybody. No two persons are alike, and no two persons' faces and other, especially biometrics and all these things are also same. This means that the Mother Nature has already thought that the human species, while they are making it different, they can also think very differently. So to me, always I look, and whenever I try to do research and try to put something, I always see how the nature is expressing its own kind of thing in the kind of the tree, that kind of birds, and that kind of other kind of thing. So my always take to the all my PhD students and to others is think, if you don't know or if you don't understand, try to go back to the nature, see the harmony, and try to write out and try to do things which is your original thing, and try to write out those things which does how like the Mother Nature is done in the natural kind of thing. I think with these words, I want to again thanks all of you have taken a long flight. You must be tired, but I think our hospitality will make you more kind of thing. You will feel happy, pleasure, and we all are here to express our thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you all the panelists for putting your valuable input. So thank you so much, and but with this we come to the end. Anyway, so thank you so much. We close the session.
अभी तुला प्रॅक्टिस
That's okay, we are ready. No, we got the different place on campus. It's just lecture. Are you sure? That's what I think.
Oh, sure.
I think we probably. And we have our fearless leader, he will tell us heavily involved.
मैं पीछे आना बोल भाई पीछे आइए कोई बात नहीं
Oh, I see. Finished. Oh, okay. It's like a question. What for you? Got that. So what you have now is the students advice? Nice speaking to you. Made by